Part 1. The elevator that stopped where it shouldn't. Nighttime New York didn't know how to be quiet. Even in the heart of Manhattan, where office towers rose into the sky like glass giants, distant sirens, the rumble of the subway underground, and the endless stream of cars buzzing below could be heard. Ethan Cole sat in his office on the 32nd floor of Metropolitan Life Insurance. The monitor's light flickered harshly across his tired face. His coffee had long gone cold, the 200-page report demanded final edits, and the wall clock had passed 1 in the morning. "Damn," Ethan muttered, rubbing his temples. "Another half hour and my brain's just going to give out." He was 32, not too old to feel exhausted, but old enough to realize this job was slowly and invisibly wearing him down. His colleagues had long since gone home. The floor was empty. Only rows of desks, switched-off computers, and the dead light of lamps overhead remained. After finishing the last spreadsheet, Ethan shut down his computer, grabbed his jacket, and headed toward the elevator lobby. The empty corridor echoed his footsteps. The elevator arrived instantly. The doors slid open with a soft, metallic sigh. Ethan stepped in and pressed the L button for the lobby. The panel of buttons glowed in neat rows, 1 to 12, 14 to 50. No 13th floor, of course. He'd read somewhere that many American buildings skipped the number 13. Superstitions, tradition, marketing, it didn't matter. People just didn't want to live or work on the unlucky floor. The cab began descending. A slight tremor ran through the floor. Ethan sighed and leaned against the cold wall. His eyes were already drooping. Then, jerk. The elevator shuddered violently and stopped. Ethan almost fell. On the display above the doors, the number 13 lit up. He froze. What the hell? The buttons on the panel remained the same. Empty space between 12 and 14. But above the doors, clearly and unmistakably, glowed the number 13. A moment later, the familiar chime rang, and the doors began to slide open. In front of him stretched a dim corridor. Ceiling lights flickered as if blinking. The ceiling was lower than on other floors. The air was heavy, musty, smelling of dust and old metal. "Probably a maintenance floor," he muttered, though he didn't truly believe it. He stepped forward. The floorboards creaked beneath his feet, a sound more like an abandoned storage space than a modern building. Behind him, the elevator doors remained open, but inside the panel no longer glowed. No numbers, no buttons, just black metal. He looked around. His heart raced faster than he liked. The corridor resembled an ordinary office, gray walls, glass doors with nameplates. But everything looked old, as if time had stopped here. He approached the nearest door and pressed his hand to the glass. Inside were desks, cabinets filled with folders. Everything was covered in dust. The monitors, huge, outdated models with rounded backs that had long disappeared from offices, stood frozen in time. "This can't be." His voice echoed against the walls. A sudden chill ran down his spine when he remembered the building had been built in 2002. Those folders simply couldn't exist here. Suddenly, at the far end of the corridor, something clinked. Barely audible, yet enough to make him freeze. "Hey? Is anyone here?" he called out. Silence. He stepped into the corridor and moved forward slowly. The flickering light cast strange shadows. And then, in the glass reflection of the doors ahead, he saw a figure. A person in a dark suit, standing very close, just a few steps away. He whipped around. The corridor was empty. He looked back at the reflection. The figure was still there, standing, unmoving. No, This can't be. His fingers went numb. He stepped back, but the figure in the reflection took a step forward. He recoiled, hitting the wall behind him with a dull thud. Somewhere behind him, the elevator doors creaked and slowly closed. The hollow metallic sound echoed down the corridor, and he realized he was alone, and the elevator had disappeared.
Part 2. Shadows between floors. Ethan stood in the middle of the corridor, trying to catch his breath. His heart pounded so loudly he could hear it in his ears. The elevator was gone. Only a solid wall remained where the doors had been just a moment ago. "No, this can't be," he whispered. "This has to be some kind of mistake." He stepped closer, running his hands over the cold metal wall. No seams, no cracks. If he hadn't remembered stepping in here, he would have thought the elevator had never existed. Calm down. It's a dream, a hallucination, fatigue. But neither a dream nor a hallucination would smell like this, a mix of old dust, rust, and something else, rotten, like a damp old floor after rain. Ethan took a deep breath and continued down the corridor. His footsteps echoed loudly in the silence, like in an empty museum. The first room looked like an archive, old cabinets stuffed with folders, a few broken chairs, peeling walls. On one of the desks sat a rotary phone. Phones like this hadn't been used in 20 years. On one of the desks was a cardboard box filled with badges. Ethan picked one up. It read, "Douglas H. Turner, Senior Analyst." He didn't know the name, but the date on the badge, printed in fine type, made him freeze. 03/14, 1999. This is insane. There can't be anything from the 90s here. The building hadn't even been under construction back then. He put the badge back and was about to leave when he heard a sound. Click, click, click. Faint footsteps at the far end of the corridor. He froze, his chest tightened. "Who's there?" he shouted. "Hey!" No answer, but the footsteps stopped. He stepped further into the corridor, moving toward the sound. The air felt heavier. It was as if the walls were closer than they seemed, as if the corridor narrowed with every step. On one of the doors hung a sign, "Conference Room B." He cautiously pressed the handle. The door opened without resistance. Inside was an empty meeting room, a long table, old leather chairs, and on the wall a clock stopped at 3:17. And yet, the room wasn't empty. 3 people sat at the table, all in business suits, slightly outdated in style. They didn't move, didn't speak, just stared at the table before them. Their faces were pale, chalk-like. "Hello?" Ethan said. One of them, a man around 50 with thin hair and glasses, slowly turned his head. His eyes were unnaturally dark, as if filled with ink. "You're late for the meeting," he said in a flat, emotionless voice. "Sorry, I think I took the wrong door." Everyone makes mistakes, but not everyone gets a chance to fix them. The third, woman with a short haircut, finally lifted her eyes. Her gaze pierced Ethan to the bone. "You don't belong here." The words made him step back. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Colleagues," said the man with glasses. "We work here, all of us. Here, this is where? Between floors." Ethan felt the blood drain from his face. What do you mean? You fell here, just like everyone does, between time and place, between what was and what will be. The woman pointed at him. But now the doors are closed. He spun around. The conference room door closed. He was sure he hadn't closed it. Okay, this is some kind of game, right? Someone decided to play a joke. Jokes end on the 12th floor. Here, they don't joke. You come here when you've left the doors open too long. Ethan couldn't take it. He lunged for the door, yanking the handle. It gave way. He shot into the corridor, his heart pounding as if it would tear out of his chest. He ran, not thinking where. Corridors bent, connected in strange loops. Around each corner, more of the same. Doors, rooms, dust. And then he saw something again. A glass partition on his left reflected his silhouette. But now, behind him in the reflection, stood someone else. He spun around. No one. He looked again into the glass. The figure stood closer. It was not him. He began backing up, eyes fixed on the reflection. At that moment, the corridor ahead changed. The walls darkened. The lights nearly went out. On the floor were streaks of dirt, as if hundreds of bare feet had passed through. And then he saw a door. Not an ordinary office door. Old, wooden, heavy, with a brass plate. Records 1984. His fingers reached for the handle. The door groaned as it opened. Inside was a large room filled with archive cabinets, but among them stood a man. The same man from the reflection. Tall, dark-haired, in an old suit. His face was strangely familiar. "You," he whispered. "We've met before," he said calmly. "You just don't remember." "Who are you?" "I used to work here, a long time ago, just like you." I don't work here, I just got stuck." Everyone says that at first, but then they realize if you ended up here, it's not by chance. Ethan stepped back. "I want to leave." The man smiled. The smile was empty, like a puppet's. "That's impossible. I'll make myself leave." "Then tell me," his voice growing colder, "where will you go if the doors no longer exist?" Ethan turned. Where there should have been an exit, there was now a wall. No, this can't be," he whispered. The man stepped closer. His eyes were black as night behind glass. "You will stay. Everyone stays." And then Ethan realized something that made his knees weaken. On the archive shelves were dozens of framed photographs. Each one showed a person in a suit, and among them, his own photo. Caption: Ethan Cole, Junior Analyst, 2025.
Part 3. The Dead Employees. Ethan couldn't tear his eyes away from the photograph immediately. His own face stared back from the yellowed frame. The same hair, the same eyes, even the tie he had worn last month. The caption at the bottom, typed on a typewire, read, "Ethan Cole, Junior Analyst, 2025. A chill ran down his spine. This wasn't a dream, not a hallucination. Everything was too clear, too real. "No," he whispered. "I couldn't have been here." The man in the dark suit stepped closer. His movements were unnaturally slow, as if he had no weight. "You're already here," he said. "All of us are here." "This is some kind of mistake," Ethan snapped. "I don't belong with you." The man tilted his head, studying him like a museum exhibit. "Everyone says that at first." Ethan spun sharply and ran. He dashed between rows of cabinets, past old photographs, past folders labeled with dates lost to the past. His breathing came in ragged gasps, his heart pounding in his ears. Eventually, he burst into a corridor. Shadows from the flickering lights twisted and stretched. He could barely see where he was running. Then, a sharp voice. "Hey, newbie!" Ethan skidded to a halt. Ahead, by the doors of another office, stood two men and a woman. All in business suits, their faces pale, dark circles under their eyes. But they were smiling. "Don't scare him," said the woman. She had short blonde hair and looked as if she had just stepped out of a corporate meeting 20 years ago. "Arrived?" Ethan stepped back. "I didn't arrive. I stumbled onto this floor by accident." "There are no accidents," said one of the men. He was tall, broad-shouldered, a badge pinned to his jacket reading Harold Vance, Regional Manager. "You work here?" He couldn't believe he was asking. The woman smiled wider. "Of course we all work here. We always have. But..." He gestured at the old furniture and dust. "Look around. There's nothing alive here." "Nothing alive," she repeated softly. "Are you sure you yourself are still alive?" Ethan's mouth dried. "This is nonsense," he muttered. "I took the elevator. I just needed to reach the lobby. It's a mistake. I have to go back." "No one goes back," Harold said. "The elevator comes only once. Then it takes the doors with it." Ethan glanced behind him. Where the elevator should have been, there was only a solid wall. "You're one of us now," the woman added. "Don't be afraid. You'll get used to it." "Get used to what?" The third man, silent until now, finally spoke. His voice was low, almost creaking. "The silence. That time does not pass here. That your place is here now." Ethan shook his head. "No, I'll find a way out." He walked past them, but they didn't stop him. They just watched, as if recognizing something familiar in him. A nearby door opened on its own. Ethan peered inside. An office space, dozens of desks, late 90s monitors, folders, phones, and every desk was occupied. People typed, flipped papers. There were dozens, all working in deep silence. As he entered, dozens of heads lifted at once. Dozens of eyes, black, pupilless, stared at him. "You're late," they said in unison. Ethan stepped back, but the entrance behind him had vanished. I don't belong?" He shouted. "I will not stay here." "You already have," the voices replied. He covered his ears, but the words continued sounding inside his head. "You stayed. You are ours." His knees buckled. He fell to them, trying not to scream. Then, one figure separated from the rest. A man with delicate features, in a suit slightly newer than the others. He leaned down and whispered, "The only way out is to become one of us, or find a replacement." What? He croaked. "The one who takes your place, then the doors will open. Otherwise, you rot here like all of us." Panic rose in Ethan. He could barely breathe. The air in the room thickened as if smoke had been added. The people around him lowered their heads and continued typing. Only fingers tapped the keyboards, but no letters appeared on the screens. He ran deeper into the room, searching for another exit. At the end, frosted glass doors. He burst through them and found himself in a new corridor. This time, the walls were darker, the wallpaper peeling, the floorboards creaking underfoot. The lights barely glowed. And there he heard it. Tick-tock, tick-tock. A large antique clock hung on the wall, its hands frozen at 12 o'clock. Ethan stepped closer. In the mirrored glass, he saw his own reflection, but it didn't mimic his movements. It stood still, staring directly at him, its eyes black like those of the people in the office. The reflection suddenly smiled. "You'll understand soon," it whispered, though its lips moved silently. Ethan recoiled. Behind him, he heard the voices again. The same people were following him down the corridor, slowly, step by step, as if in no hurry. He dashed forward, not knowing where. Ahead again, doors. He shoved them open and burst into another room. And there, in the midst of dust and old furniture, he saw a desk. On the desk, another photograph. This time, his own. But the face had changed. Black eyes, lips twisted into a distorted smile. Caption: Ethan Cole, permanent resident.
Part 4. The Doppelganger. Ethan stood, gasping, staring at the photograph with his own face and the words, "permanent resident." His hands trembled, as if holding something frozen. He wanted to throw the frame, but his fingers didn't obey, as if the frame had fused to his skin. He finally wrenched it free, tossed it to the floor, and heard glass shatter. But instead of shards, a black liquid spread across the floor, thick like oil. It spread down the corridor slowly but inevitably, reflecting his own face within it. "Go away," Ethan whispered. He ran. His footsteps echoed hollowly, and the black liquid flowed after him, flooding the corridor. At the end, another set of doors. He pushed them open and found himself in a new room. A vast conference hall. A table for 20, leather chairs, portraits of men and women in formal suits on the walls. All their eyes glowed with a dim red light. Ethan approached the table. At its center sat a clock. Small, silver-framed, its hands frozen at 12, just like in the corridor. And then he realized he no longer felt his heartbeat. He pressed his hand to his chest. Silence. Not a single beat. "Am I dead?" "No," came a voice from behind. Ethan spun sharply. Seated at the table was himself. Absolutely identical. The same suit, the same hairstyle, but the eyes, black as tar. "What is this?" Ethan croaked. The doppelganger smiled. This is your future, who you become when you stop resisting. I will not be you. You already are. Look. Ethan looked down. His hands were pale, the veins blackening as if filled with the same liquid that had poured from the frame. No, this isn't me. Time has stopped for you, the doppelganger said calmly. There is no yesterday or tomorrow here, only the endless now. Sooner or later you will understand that resisting is pointless. Ethan stepped back, tripping over a chair. Why me? Why did I end up here? The doppelganger rose and walked along the table. His steps made no sound. Because you were always an outsider in your world, lonely, frustrated, angry at your life, your job, everything around you. And someone heard that cry inside you. Someone opened the door. That's a lie. I wanted another life, but not this one. Here, you won't have to choose. Here, you are eternal. Here, you are part of the collective. The portraits on the walls seemed to come alive. The people in them slowly turned their heads toward Ethan. Their eyes glowed redder. You cannot escape, they said in unison. Ethan covered his ears, but the voices rang directly in his head. He dashed toward the doors, but they had vanished. Only a solid wall remained. The doppelganger stepped closer, touching his shoulder. The touch was icy, like metal. Accept me, and it will be easier for you. Ethan pushed him away, screaming, I'll find a way out. Then the clock on the table suddenly began to tick. The hands moved, but strangely not forward in time, backward. 11:59, 11:58, 11:57. The doppelganger looked at the clock and grimaced. You are making a mistake. Ethan grabbed the clock, pressing it to his chest. The countdown sped up. Hundreds of voices spun in his head. Don't give, stop, time is all we have. He ran from the hall. The corridor stretched, the lights going out one by one. But ahead, he saw something. A faint glow, like open doors. The doppelganger followed slowly, step by step. You will come back anyway. You cannot escape yourself. Ethan ran as fast as he could. The light grew brighter. He finally reached the doors, metal, with the number 13 on a plaque. He pushed them. He was back in the elevator. The doors closed slowly, and he saw the doppelganger standing on the other side, smiling, raising a hand in a farewell gesture. See you soon, he whispered. The doors shut. The elevator jolted and began to descend. Ethan trembled, clutching the clock. The hand still moved backward. 11:30, 11:29. He was afraid to let it go, fearing time would stop again. The elevator suddenly halted. The lights inside flickered. On the panel, all the floor numbers vanished, leaving only one. 13. Ethan closed his eyes. Please, not back. The elevator dinged. The doors opened. He saw the lobby. A guard behind the desk, people entering from the street, the city noise, clicking heels and ringing phones. Everything was real, alive. He looked down at the clock. The hands continued moving backward. 10:45, 10:44. And suddenly, he understood. This wasn't escape. This was a countdown. A countdown to something waiting ahead. Part 5. The Countdown. Ethan walked down the street, clutching the silver clock to his chest. The New York crowd buzzed around him, taxi horns blaring, someone playing the saxophone on the corner, shop windows flashing neon light. But he heard almost nothing. His attention was consumed by the hands of the clock. 10:30, 10:29, 10:28. This couldn't be real. He tried to convince himself the clock was just a strange souvenir from that horrible FlooR. But the longer he watched, the more he realized the hands weren't moving randomly. They were counting down the minutes. "Countdown," he whispered. "To what?" His phone buzzed. A message from a colleague. "Don't forget tomorrow's presentation. Management will be waiting." Ethan glanced at the clock. 10:15. It wasn't tomorrow. It was today, and it was counting down to 0. He quickened his pace. His mind was buzzing. Maybe if I throw it away, it will stop. On the bridge over the Hudson, he paused and held the clock over the water, but his fingers wouldn't release it. They clutched the metal as if it were part of his own body. The harder he tried to let go, the more it hurt. "Let go!" he shouted to himself. But the clock only ticked louder. 9:50. Passers-by gave him strange looks. To them, he seemed like a madman in a suit, talking to the air. He lowered his gaze. In the glass of a nearby storefront, he saw him, the doppelganger, standing on the other side of the reflection, staring directly at him, smiling. "What do you want from me?" he yelled. The doppelganger only put a finger to his lips, signaling silence. Then he pointed to the clock and disappeared. He felt his heart pound. So he's still watching. He's waiting. Night came too quickly. He locked himself in his apartment, drew the curtains, turned off his phone. He sat on the floor in the center of the room, the clock on his lap. 8 o'clock. 7:59. "You think I'm afraid? No, I just won't let you take me." But the voices echoed in his head, the same ones he'd heard on the 13th floor. "The countdown cannot be stopped. 0 means your place. 0 means return." He covered his ears, but the voices didn't cease. The cabinet door opened. A chill blew out. In the mirror above the dresser, the reflection stirred. The doppelganger stood there, waiting. "Soon," it whispered. "Soon you will return home." Ethan grabbed a chair and hurled it at the mirror. The glass shattered into fragments, but even in them he saw the doppelganger's black, unblinking eyes. 5 o'clock. 4:59. When the countdown passed the 4-hour mark, the apartment lights went out. Ethan darted to the window. Outside, everything was normal. Streetlights shone, cars moved. But inside his apartment, there was only darkness. From the shadows, figures began to appear, the same suited people he had seen in the office. They emerged from corners, passing through walls, furniture. Their faces were blank, expressionless, only black eyes. They formed a circle around him. "What do you want?" he shouted. "Time," they replied in unison. "Give us the time." The clock in his hands ticked loudly. 4:30. He realized they didn't want his life. They wanted the hours, his time on Earth. And when the hands reached 0, he would be forced to go with them. "No," Ethan stood, clutching the clock. "This is my time. You will not have it." 2 o'clock. 1:59. He ran from the apartment, racing down the stairs. He was too afraid to even see the elevator. New York streets were still alive. People returned from bars, taxis honked. But everything sounded distant, as if underwater, as if he had already separated from the living. He sat on a bench in Central Park. The clock read 1:30. The doppelganger sat beside him. No one else saw him. People walked past, oblivious. "You're holding up well," said the doppelganger. "But you know, in the end, only I will remain." "Why me? Why me?" he whispered. "Because you always dreamed of a way out."
Now you haven't. This is a trap. This is a choice. The clock ticked. 1 o'clock. The doppelganger vanished, as if dissolved into the air. 10, 9. Ethan stood on the roof of his building. The city sparkled with thousands of lights. The wind lashed his face. The clock trembled in his hands. "If you take me," he said to the night sky, "I will make my choice myself." 5, 3. You do not control me. 1, 0. Silence. The wind ceased. All the city lights went out for a moment. Then they flared back on. Ethan stood, breathing heavily. Nearby, fragments of the clock, black liquid evaporating. He touched his chest. His heart was beating, real, alive. I survived. He turned to leave the roof. And then, in the dark glass of the door, he saw his reflection. The doppelganger, standing, smiling, holding a new clock in his hands. The hands had already begun the countdown. 11:59, 11:58.